find that if you look at this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
Thanks for staying with us. It is now time to look at the major stories that make up into the front pages of today's newspapers. And we will start with Daily Trust. Today's Daily Trust, the lead story says NDLEA State House Army top list as FG budgets 23.57 billion for vehicles, 22.5 billion voted for same item this year, that is for the year 2022. 20 agencies to spend 29.32 billion on refreshment, sitting allowance, welfare, others. And the last rider for the major story says proposal frivolous meant to siphon funds, according to CSO. And okay, just right there, you have an infographic showing the big spenders to the right, the five big spenders, NDLEA with 20 billion, State House, Nigerian Army, NAFDAC, and Accident and Investigation Bureau. And then, and other details, if you pick the paper, you see other details about breakdown of the budget. And then to the left, more stories, cooking gas price soars as NLNG cuts supply. Story on page 27, and then now just below that, why petrol is still scarce in Abuja after Lokoja flood. IPMAN, that is Independent Petroleum Marketers Association. And then lastly, on that row, ISWAP storms Boko Haram enclave, kills 6, seizes weapons. Story on page 5. Then the last story on the front page of today's Daily Trust is on the black belt, just below the picture, below the infographic there. Terror attacks likely in Abuja, says U.S. Story on page 6. So this and many other stories can be found in today's Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, so let's take a look at the Punch newspaper as well. On the Punch newspaper, the lead story there talks about the federal government subsidy spending to hit 11 trillion naira in 2023. It has the riders that says government has spent 6.88 trillion naira on PMS subsidy so far. It says that that's according to NNPC and NATI. Regime to spend 1.3 trillion naira on rehabilitation, maintenance of refineries. And then federal government steps up oil theft probe, begins prosecution. You would also find other stories there above the masthead that says FG may announce airport concession winners this week. FCT risk attack, says US DHQ allays fears. Punch investigates investigations editor actually wins top West African Journalism Award. You also have PDP APC trade accusations over Tinubu Atiku's manifestos. Other stories below the pictorial there says, actually the story about the pictorial says 539 stranded Nigerians couldn't get UAE work permits, according to NEMA. Kerosene price soars by 118%, fuels anxiety. Dubai jails Nigerian lady for filming maltreatment. Family protest. Ex-convict rapes 12-year-old Ogun pupil to death. So these are the stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
Up next is the Nation newspaper, where the major story is also about the security alert in Abuja. Security alert in Abuja to forestall attack by bandits. US, UK's issued travel advice. And then, of course, the DHQ is saying no cause for alarm. And to the left, to the right of the front page, Northeast Commission lifts Yobe flood victims with relief materials. Government louds intervention. And you have pictorials showing that activity. And if you go back to the top of the page, floods, Lagos begins dredging of canals. Tinubu's 100 million, Tinubu donates 100 million naira for Kano. 542 stranded Nigerians evacuated from UAE. And beside that, telecom sector contributes $70 billion to economy, says NCC, story on page 6. And then investors' apathy threatens 10.78 trillion deficit funding. And then below the masthead, NDLEA arrests 4 wanted kingpins over 16 tons of drugs. A story on page 7. And then lastly, below, just below that, I'm fit to rule, says Tinubu. And of course, the pictorial beside that showing the Lagos State Governor and Managing Director of Chief Executive Group Managing Director of NNPC Limited, Mr. Amele Kari, and CEO of Pinnacle Oil and Gas, Mr. Peter Imba, during the cutting of cake to mark the official inauguration of Pinnacle Oil and Gas, $1 billion intake and offtake terminal at the Lekki Free Trade Zone at the weekend. So these are the the stories on the front page of the Nation newspaper this morning.
All right, let's take a look at the Tribune, the Nigerian Tribune this morning. It has a political story leading. It says, Tinubu Atiku in fresh row. I won't govern Nigeria from Dubai. That's according to Tinubu, seemingly, I would say, kind of, making a mockery of, the presidential candidate of the PDP, Atiku Abubakar. On the flip side of it, you have Tinubu has no record of fulfilling promises. That's according to the PDP. Above the masthead, police arrest IPOB commander, destroy shrine, camps in Ebonyi. Why Nigerian shop owners may lose out from $19 billion Dangote refinery. You also have below the masthead, Borno inaugurates 804 houses to resettle displaced persons. That's on page 27. AFDB launches schemes to create jobs for youths in Nigeria on page 19. And then court stops EFCC from disrupting governance in Bauchi on page 27. Other stories there, footballer drowns after rescuing 5 flood victims in Bayelsa. Nigeria committed to ending open defecation by 2025, says minister. Insured flood victims to get prompt payment of claims, NICOM. FG evacuates 542 stranded Nigerians from UAE. NDLEA naps 4 wanted kingpins over 16 tons illicit drugs in Abuja, Lagos, 5 other states. These are the stories, the major stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
Okay, and let's now look at the leadership newspapers. Leadership is also leading with their politics story. It says 2023 presidency supremacy contest. In supremacy contest for Kano, Atiku Tinubu go dirty. And the story has some riders. I won't be a part-time president hibernating in Dubai always, APC flag bearer says. And empty Kano Street signpost to a defeat, ex-BP fires back. We own Kano, you are just fighting in vain, NNPP tells APC PDP. Atiku's picture missing on Rivers PDP branded vehicles. Okay, all the details of this story could be found on page 4 of today's leadership newspapers. And just below the masthead of there, manufacturers lament high interest rates, seek friendly policies. And then below that, flood at leadership Twitter spaces, NEMA 6 LG Disaster Management Committee, that's local government disaster management committees. And to the right, travel ban, FG evacuates 542 Nigerians stranded in UAE. And then 3 justices who sat on Nnamdi Kanu's appeal transferred. Stories on page 37. And then NDLEA arrest 4 kingpins over 16 tons of drugs in Lagos and Abuja. And then at the very top of the page, we are not aware of U.S. security alert to citizens, says the police. And then Niger sacks 27 judicial workers for certificate racketeering. So these are highlights of the front page of the leadership newspapers this morning.
Okay, on the Guardian newspaper, it leads with the story that says cholera cases, death surge amid nationwide flooding. You also would have above that, Kanu, anxiety as Supreme Court hears FG's appeal today. You also have youths raise concern over 2023 elections as group offers path for peaceful exercise. So these are the main stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning.
So with this, we take some analysis and insights into some of these stories. And we have in the studio Mr. Nelson Yakubu Omonu, publisher of Summit Post newspaper, who joins us this morning for to give us some analysis of the news. Good morning, Mr. Omonu, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. Thank you, Mr. Ayo.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the stories this morning are, of course, maybe typical of Mondays, mixed bags. So many things, politics, the flood disaster, and also the issue of security, especially the alerts in Abuja. Maybe let's start from that. Proximity in news is very important. What do you make of the U.S. government's, U.S. embassy statement, which came out last night? And then, of course, there is another one, though some say it's unverified, from the UK High Commission about the same issue.
We should, given our recent history, I think we should take this very seriously. We should not handle it with kid blood, because if it's coming from the U.S. authorities, and we should give some credence to the alerts. And not to forget, few months ago, we had one very close to us here, the Kuje prison jailbreak. So if, there's no alert now that we're going to discontinue us, that we're going to say maybe it's not true or it's true or anything. We should not gamble with anything coming from that kind of source, because if you check, before December last year, there was a similar alert from the United States government that likely Russia was going to invade Ukraine. And by the time we get to February, of course, it happened. So if there's an alert from that kind of source, we should not couple with what we've had recently and our security peculiarities in recent time. I think we should handle that with every seriousness it deserves.
The report highlights some public locations, so public gatherings as a major target. It talks about worship centers, talks about markets, talks about restaurants, hotels, bars, talks about even schools, government buildings,
targets,
government, buildings and all of that. So what should we be doing? These are regular places where a lot of people go. You cannot do without going there.
That's right.
So except for maybe things like travels, it says, okay, one of the advisory is that people should cut down on unnecessary travel. So that is something you can control in such a way. But for markets, schools, and all of those, these are places that people cannot, if you like, cannot do without going to.
Mr. Ayuba, the problem we are having here is a failure of intelligence. For this kind of alerts, we have to do more with intelligence, and most times these people move en masse. I don't see how 100 people will move in a particular direction, and we all we don't know how it happened. We should know how it happened, because there are people that are trusted with the responsibility of detecting this, and I think by now we should have, technology has made a lot of things very, very easy. That satellite can pick movement of maybe 100 people moving in a particular direction. That is what we should be doing, and gathering intelligence on how did the U.S. government get to know that there is something like that. It's through intelligence gathering from across. We own our territory. I think we should do more to take charge of what happened within, and the right people should be put in right places so that we can up our games. This is one too many waiting for people from outside to tell us that something may likely happen. And then, like you said, that the police said they are not aware. Whether they are aware or not, they should do something about it, because we are not going to have another Kuje episode in Nigeria. That won't be good for us, now, especially given that it's soft targets they are looking at, where worship centers, markets, schools. That would be disastrous at a time like this.
Okay. That's quite interesting. But let's now maybe look at the front page again of Daily Trust, where the lead story talks about huge spending in vehicles, for acquiring of vehicles by different agencies of government.
My heart was actually skipping when you were reading out that the Daily Trust did very excellent job today by reminding us go to that extent to dig out these details. Nigerians should know that irrespective of the economic turmoil, so to speak, that their country is going through, our public, the attitude of our public officials does not reflect the reality here. If you are asking the citizens to belt up, what of the public officials? What happened to the vehicles that we purchased in 2020 budget, 2021 budget? Are we refurbishing them, or we are buying new?
Isn't that in tandem with the need of the moment? I mean, we always talk about logistics for security personnel or institutions or agencies. I mean, from looking at the list, the list of the
breakdown,
the breakdown of top spenders on vehicles, you could see that the NDLEA is right there at the top of it.
The NDLEA is delivering at the moment.
The Nigerian Army and all that, some of these security officials. So you could say that, well, it's in line with the need that there is at the moment. We always talk about logistics, how that security personnel are unable to deploy,
that's right,
in good time to respond to emergency situations.
And sometimes if you go to the premises of this, you see broken down vehicles that ordinarily you can refurbish and put to good use. You see them broken everywhere, but we are still budgeting for new ones, refurbishing the broken down ones so that they will be put back to use. That is both for the Nigerian Army, given the security situation we have on our hands. Okay, maybe we have more. But to talk of the presidency, more vehicles to the presidency, and I think at the time we are saying that we need to give more money to ASU, though some amount has been approved already. So at a time like this, I think, and the most heartbreaking is the allowances, refreshment and all that.
Yes, that's 20 agencies are to spend 29.32 billion naira on refreshment, sitting allowance, welfare and others.
That shouldn't be for a time like this, that we have a lot of things on our hands, and we're actually like, if you ask me, we're eating our destiny with 10 fingers and 10 toes. Because we can actually cut down on the so-called refreshment that's running into nearly 30 billion under a year, when our schools need infrastructures, when we need...
So do you think that perhaps the rising inflation is also impacting on the cost of governance in the country?
The cost of governance...
And what are the options that we should be looking at?
It's the area of refreshment that is my concern. It's the area of... See, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. If we have to sacrifice for our country, if really we mean to salvage this country, And that is to say that where we are supposed to, for crying out loud, irrespective of what we are saying about inflation, 30 whole billion naira for a traumatized people like Nigerians, hearing that people in government space, I think that is for federal. Okay, that amount is for federal. Okay, we are not talking of the 30 states of the federation, yes, and the federal capital.
All right, so for the vehicles now, should we be looking more towards local contents as suggested by some? So for instance, you have these vehicles that we do, I mean, we buy year in, year out. A lot of them are going to be imported.
Yes,
meanwhile, we have local assembling plants here in Nigeria where we can actually reduce the cost by patronizing them,
and then use
and all that.
It to reflect our economy.
Should
I think the Nigerian
would that
Army,
be an option?
The Nigerian Army has, in the last few years, tried to patronize one of the indigenous car manufacturing company to manufacture logistics. I think trucks and all that. Maybe I may not like to mention them now because we are not going to advertise for them. But Nigerian Army has taken some steps to patronize local car manufacturing plant company. But then, for the presidency,
perhaps we should replicate that in other agencies.
In other agencies, and apart from that, the presidency don't need more vehicles now. What the presidency needs, if the ones they already have should be refurbished and put to see. Let our example start from the top. Let it start from the top. I sincerely believe that this is the time we have to tighten our belt, and then, but we must show example from the top. And the allowances, sitting allowances, and the refreshments that is running into 30 billion. I think government should also look at it to see how this can be scaled down. Let's give governance human face. We'll look at what our citizens are going through. Then we'll now compare it to what somebody who is going to sit somewhere. And let me point out this, that there is need for us to continue to look at our system of government. If 30 billion is going to go for sitting allowance and all that, and I think we should begin to give consideration to issues like part-time legislators, so that it's only when you have sitting that you are paid for your sitting allowance. By so doing, we begin to scale down contestation for power. By so doing, we reduce cost of governance.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Ku, I have to step in here. These are very important points you are making, but let's refocus the discussion a bit. The editorial of Daily Trust this morning speaks about the INEC leadership. There was outcries recently, alarm raised by some actors that the INEC chairman, or there is a move to remove the INEC chairman. And then, of course, this morning, Daily Trust editorial is saying that that should not be contemplated, especially within extra legal means. What's your take about that?
No, that is a sad one. If there is a clandestine move to sabotage INEC at a point like this, that is especially coming few months to a critical election in the history of Nigeria. I think everything, and this also should go a long way to tell us that we'll have to, after the general election, the CSOs, of course, the onus is on them to begin to think of how to advocate for security of tenure for an INEC chairman. Because if there is a clandestine move to remove him, that is to say that somebody wants something that the man is not ready to give. And maybe certain powers, wants to ensure that they get him out of the way so that they can subvert the process. So that calls for action from the civil society organization. They should be on their toes. They should come up with a new proposal, a push for security of tenure for an INEC chairman. Except for so-so and so-so, he cannot be removed. And that is one of the ways we can guarantee that the independence of that, as the name goes, and that will help to boost the confidence of any man sitting on that seat to be able to take independent action that is in the interest of our electoral system. The coming at this time, I think those behind it don't mean this country well.
All right, so let's just move on to other stories. We have another story here that appears virtually on all the papers, so talking about stranded Nigerians in the UAE. We understand 539 of them, did not have work permits and have been repatriated back to Nigeria and all that. So it looks like that relationship between Nigeria and UAE is now kind of sour. Yeah. And especially at a time like this when many Nigerians are seeking greener pastures, across the borders of Nigeria. And UAE is one of those locations where you have a very high number of Nigerians, really, in recent times.
Well, Mr. Yuba, a lot of things are involved in Nigeria-UAE altercation. Let me use that word. The attitude of our people that are going there is one of the things we should consider. Internally, what are we doing? As at 62, that a report, an international report says in Nigeria, Brazil, and India, we're going to join the developed world in 15 years. There was no mention of South Korea, there was no mention of UAE, there was no mention of it is an indictment. That number of our citizens, that is just one country. Those are the ones that were not able to get work permits. That is to say that we can talk about millions of Nigerians in that country. So that is a call to action that we should do more to make our governance system, to make back home conducive, because there are many people who will not want to go out, but remain in their country so that they can enjoy their culture, their civilization, instead of going to other lands and become second-class citizens. So I've now finished. Now, on the part of our people, maybe going to any part of the world. I was talking with a friend in Kenya recently who told me that there are some of your people here that if you see the way they behave and all that, I won't be proud as a friend. That they are just lowering the dignity of Nigerians. That they exalt Nigeria, they like Nigeria, the kind of spirit we have, but there are elements within our population that are bent on pulling down. So, as at the risk of sounding as a sympathizer to some of these Nigerians out there, are Nigerians the only people that break the laws in those countries that they go to? And what are those, the host country is supposed to do, with, even if they are Nigerians breaking the laws and engaging in criminality and the rest of that? At what point did the UAE start having issues with our citizens? Especially as it has to do with work permits, granting of visa and all that. It's of recent. When the desperation, our value system start crashing, and the desperation to hit it big at all costs. For crying out loud, there are other Africans in those countries that we don't read much. Recently, we heard of a court clash by Nigerians in the UAE. That is ridiculous. You left your shores to another man's land.
So perhaps certain kinds of criminality is peculiar to Nigerians. Is that the case? Is sickening.
It's sickening. The way they behave here, most of us will go out again and want to be that assertive, especially as it has to do with breaking law with impunity. And no responsible nation will take it. So I think internally we should do more to be able to put things in place. That is one. Then two, we should reorientate our people, that if you go to other people's land, like the NIDCOM boss has been shouting to high heaven, that listen, if you go to other people's land, make sure you obey the rules and regulations guiding the laws of the land. That if you break the law, the government might likely not come for you. That is, if the country has very legal ground to detain you or to arrest you or to punish you. So we must do more with our people. When you go out and you project yourself and you have the need to be in that country, you don't need to engage in criminality, and you are engaging. These countries that we're talking about, they are Nigerians that are celebrated in those countries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
They are celebrated in those countries without, so because they are not against the law.
Okay, so thank you very much. Now let's now look at the issue of flood. You know, so many things, cholera outbreaks. We've seen Borno governor earlier played a package in which the Borno state governor is talking about aid for flood victims in terms of cholera outbreak and all that. What's also the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning, talking about cholera cases, death surge amid nationwide flooding, and then also somewhere on page 2 of today's leadership newspapers, also there is that issue of the concern about the woes of you know, the flood, you know, that trails the flood. And in Daily Trust, again on the front page, there is a story about NLNG, you know, the gas issue, which is they declare force majeure. I'm sure maybe you are aware. Like, in terms of our response and you know, forget alertness because it has already happened. But the response, are we really? How has the responsible agencies done?
Well, Mr. Abdulaziz, let me start with the gas problem. It's like a man standing in the middle of the river, and there's still soap in his eyes. So that is the unfortunate. If you talk about countries that don't have all these resources, agree that they depend on imports. But right at our backyard here, we have everything flowing under our soil. But it has to do with certain class trying to keep people in perpetual in perpetual pains. Okay, what are we going to enjoy as citizens of a country that God has so blessed so much? If you go to gas station now, you see people come with cylinders. Maybe they go for a quarter or they go for half. They can have, too many people can hardly fill 12 kg now. So that is where we are as a nation. And I think that it is not in isolation. It's also part of the larger problem that we are facing. Now, back to the flood concern. We are not people who learn. We don't learn. Sorry. We don't learn from other people's history. Other people's mistakes. And we also don't fail to learn from our own mistakes. In 2012, we had this similar problem. Okay, like if you are coming from Lokoja, for instance, River Niger was, the plan to dredge River Niger has been on the drawing board since 1958. If you dredge a river, the depth and the width, then it will be able to accommodate more quantity of water. That is the one that spreads everywhere will just gather in one place. Why is it that if we try to do anything good, it will always not work? If you're passing through a Morentala Bridge, you will still see the equipments that are there for dredging, but it's neither here nor there. Secondly, Lagos Dam has been there on the drawing board since the 60s, so that anytime the water is released from Lagos Dam, because you don't expect Cameroon to allow their dam to burst. When water level is becoming too much, they will have to release it. Now, where do we have any buffer that will take the water that is released from Cameroon?
These are very germane issues regarding control of the flood. And unfortunately, the discussion is getting very interesting, but we have to cut here because of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Nelson Yakubu Obonupo, being here with us this morning. And we hope to have you another time. Okay. Yeah. And with this, we have a pause, and we will come back to you, and the show will continue at the top of the hour. Do stay with us.
Where you find that look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that